Good morning, everyone. So today we're going to be talking about line of business apps in Microsoft Teams. We're going to focus more on building line of business apps than just general apps today. So we're going to dive into. So slides work. Okay, so just a quick little bit about the community call. The AKA link is up there. The next one will be March 19th at 8 a.m. That was 8 a.m. Pacific. And yeah, we're going to talk about all this stuff. So today, what we're going to talk about, I'll do a little brief intro of myself. We're going to go through what's new, what's been new in the last few days. Can you mute yourself, please? Okay, I'll keep going, but if you could mute yourself, please, that'd be great. So we're going to talk about what's new for developers. We're going to go through sort of an overview of line of business apps on Microsoft Teams, on the Teams platform, and we're going to be presenting it in a little bit of a different format today. I'm kind of testing out something structurally a little bit different from ways that we presented this information in the past. So if you've been through an overview of building apps on Teams before, I would love your feedback. Either send it to me in Twitter or chat us or reach out to us through the other various channels, tech community, all that kind of stuff. But I would love your feedback on this format. If it was helpful, if you found this helpful, I'd really appreciate that. So we're going to talk about why you want to build line of business apps on the Teams platform, what kind of problems you can solve, the building blocks that the Teams platform provides for you. We'll jump into a couple demos on, I'll have various demos throughout the presentation. And then we'll talk about some getting started resources. We'll do a what's coming up and new stuff coming out in the next 30 days, and hopefully we'll have time for some Q&A at the end. Okay, so I am Andrew Clear. You can always reach out to me on Twitter at aclear16. I will be more than happy to respond to any questions you have. Follow me for Teams updates and that kind of stuff. I am a senior program manager on the Teams platform team, responsible for making sure the community has the content and information that they need to make build amazing apps. So yeah. Quickly, what's new in the last 30 days on the Teams platform? So since the holidays, we've really been focusing on stability and performance fixes and doing some back-end work to enable some amazing stuff that we can't really talk about yet. But hey, come to build or follow us over the next couple of months, and we've got some really amazing things coming out that we're really excited about. One of the new features that we have pushed into GA is the ability to trigger deep links that can open up a chat window or can initiate chat actions as well as scheduling actions. So pre-filling out a meeting request based on a deep link. All right. Into today's talk. So first we want to talk about why you would want to build line of business apps on Microsoft Teams in general. So first and foremost, effortless discovery, right? The whole idea behind Teams is that it's a communication and workflow hub for your workflows. So before I jump into that, I wanted to make sure I define line of business applications. So what we're talking about here is applications that you or someone else builds directly for your organization, not something that you're publishing to the App Store that you're going to distribute wide, but something that is designed to work just for your organization. So when I say line of business applications, that's what I mean, an application designed specifically for a specific organization and deployed just for that organization. So yeah, effortless discovery. The power of Teams is that it really can be a centralized communication hub that centralizes both workflow and collaboration around those workflows. And the more you can incorporate their existing other workflows into the Teams platform, the more you're going to drive adoption and the more value you're going to get out of the platform itself. Line of business apps are awesome because you can control the audience for the apps. You can install them at the organization level, the group channel or personal level. Admins can push them or users can pull them. So there's a lot of flexibility in who gets what apps and how they access those apps. It makes it pretty easy to get the app to the right people in the right place to increase discoverability and make it a lot easier for your users to use them. And then conversations come through. A lot of times you need to discuss a workflow with people who aren't necessarily involved in the workflow. And Teams is designed to enable you to have conversations around all of these different things. So it's all sort of integrated in, and it's a highly collaborative platform, right? Excuse me. And what we're going to focus on a lot today is this idea of a rich app platform. Though there are a lot of different ways to interact with your users, and we're constantly adding more and extending the existing ways to really give you flexibility in how your users are going to interact with your app. We'll dig into that a lot today. That's kind of the core of what we're going to talk about today. And then, last but not least, obviously, the whole, mobile first idea, cross-platform, everything works everywhere. With Teams, that's our goal, is parity across all platforms. We recognize that we're not quite there yet, but we are getting much closer, and over the next few months we will be even pretty close to parity across all platforms. Okay, so we talked about this a little bit. We want to reduce context switching and use Teams as a hub for everything else. And today we're talking primarily about line of business apps built by or for your organization that are customized to meet your specific business needs, that are accessible to your users and teams in the context that you want to make them accessible. So the idea here is that we can build customized solutions. First-party apps are awesome. The ability to drop in Excel tabs and planner tabs and all of that kind of stuff. Those are apps that Microsoft built. Third-party apps, these are the ones you're going to get from the store. You download the Trello app and you can have a Trello tab and talk about your Trello cards or whatever. Line of business apps you build or someone builds for you, and you customize them specifically for yourself. All right, so what kinds of problems can you solve with Teams apps? And this is a little bit, so we want to talk about two sort of categories of apps that you can build. There's a lot of different ways you can slice and structure this, but for today I want to talk about sort of two major categories. The first one is migrating or integrating existing things, apps, workflows. Sometimes it's just an Excel book with some macros, whatever. Migrating and integrating those things with Teams. This is a great place to start, because it's a good way to drive Teams adoption and learn building apps on the platform within a well-defined scope. You already have an app or a website or something, but you want to make it more discoverable, easier for your users to use, or you want to extend it with some collaboration and conversation aspects to an existing app that's sort of on its own. Pulling those in can really get you started in a way that's safe and easy to do. But it's also really good for your users because it's something that they've already used. You don't have to teach them anything new. You're telling them, hey, this your approval app that you already did, or your ticketing system app that you were already using, hey, now it's in Teams, and you can just go ahead and not have to switch platforms to go over here to do that thing. You can do it straight from Teams. It really works quite well. It's one of the places that we highly recommend you get started. If you've got well, for example, one of the places we started was with facilities management, right? We generate lots of facilities requests, and we already had an app for sending in facilities requests. This wasn't something new that we just came up with out of the blue. But by bringing it into Teams, we made it a lot easier and more discoverable for our users. They didn't have to go somewhere else. It was already on a platform that existed inside their normal day-to-day workflows. So we put together a bot that allowed you to create facilities requests. You could just jump into a one-to-one conversation with the bot, and we'll talk about a lot about bots here, because there's a lot of misconceptions about what a bot is or how complex your bot needs to be and stuff. But suffice to say that your bot while your bot can do a lot of advanced scenarios, it can also do very simple scenarios where you have only a few options that your bot can facilitate. I want to make a general cleaning request. Okay, cool. Here's your adaptive card that pulls up, and you fill it out. You click submit. You get a little task module pop-up that says, great, here it is. We'll be there as soon as we can. And that's it. This is a fairly simple bot to build. There's nothing really crazy complicated here, but it's a great way to get your users thinking about the idea of using Teams for more than just chatting with their teammates. Apps like this are great entry points. They're a really easy way to get started. And there's a lot of other things that we can do. We do connectors to Stack Overflow when we're answering questions that we can then do sentiment analysis. And there's lots more complex patterns that you can do on top of this, but just pulling in a regular workflow with a simple, only a couple different options for the user gets them into the idea of using Teams as an app platform and not just as a communication platform. But then you can get into the really, really interesting scenarios, right? So on the one hand, you have all of the apps that you already have, all of the stuff that you couldn't pull in or integrate into Teams. On the other hand, you have the ability to enable previously improbable scenarios. I wanted to say impossible, but this wasn't impossible before, but it was usually prohibitively expensive or overly complex, or you had to go buy some third-party solution. But the idea here is that you can create highly collaborative scenarios with targeted and sometimes ad hoc audiences. The ability to say, hey, for this scenario, I need to pull in these 15 people for this conversation based on these parameters, and they get these forms, and they can have discussions about it, and you can flow through different bits and pieces. Teams gives you a lot of flexibility to enable stuff that you just really couldn't do before. Yeah, we'll dive into the example. So live site incident management is a thing that pretty much everybody has to deal with one way or another. One of our groups here excuse me, uses this. Based on external triggers and monitoring systems, they create a live site incident automatically. The live site incident needs to be able to pull in the right people, create a call, add log files and information to the call, and get everybody on the same page in a virtual meeting without a bunch of manual steps in the middle. It drastically reduces the amount of time that collaboration starts. A lot of getting your war room spun up when you have an incident is sometimes one of the longest ways, the biggest delay in solving the incident. Get all the right information and all of the right people in a room talking, and you can usually solve the problem pretty quick. With Teams, you can build a solution where all of that stuff happens fairly quickly. Based on an external trigger, it fires up a bot, it creates an incident, chats with whoever's on call, creates a call, then you have the option to, hey, I want to join the call. I want to, with a calling bot, you can join the call. You could just listen to the details. You could say, nope, sorry, I can't do this right now. Grab the next agent and call them. So the bot's calling an individual directly. Once the individual joins the call, it goes ahead and pulls them into a call, and everybody gets on, and it's already attached the log files to the call, and has everything set up for you. So there are solutions that you can buy that would do this for you, right? But with Teams, it can be integrated into their normal workflow and a platform where you can then share this information very easily with someone. You don't have to have a static list of licensed users who are in your incident management. If you needed to pull in someone who didn't normally service incidents into this call, you could do so very quickly from Teams, right? Because everybody's got a license for Teams pretty much. So it facilitates a high level of flexibility that you just wouldn't have if you had some specific solution that only did this, which is pretty cool. Okay, so now I want to talk about sort of the rich app platform and the building blocks around Microsoft Teams apps. And first, we'll start with an important note. Microsoft Teams doesn't host your app, right? You don't deploy code to Microsoft Teams that then stands up, web endpoints or whatever. What you deploy to Microsoft Teams is a manifest file, a JSON, that contains pointers and parameters to tell your teams where your app is and how to talk to it, right? Your app itself is hosted somewhere else. You've got websites, or you've got bots, or you've got whatever. Teams itself just sort of orchestrates the conversation between these bits, but Teams does not host your app. It'll be confusing for some people in the beginning. And I wanted to throw a little plug in here for App Studio because App Studio is amazing. Making your manifest by hand can be quite difficult. If you have not checked out App Studio, it is a Teams app that you can install that will guide you through creating your manifest, or standing up your bot, or getting your bot IDs, or adding commands to your bot, all of that kind of stuff, and building a rich, compliant manifest, always on the current version of the manifest. App Studio will help you get there very quickly. Okay. Structurally wise, we want to talk about two different categories of building blocks. You have platform interfaces, which are ways that you can present information and interact to your users. And then you have interactive communication tools, which is the structure of the information that you're presenting to them. So the things on the left contain the things on the right. For example, you can have a bot that presents cards to your users to interact with them. But the platform interfaces are sort of the top level. These are the ways that your user is going to present your app to your user, and then you'll make use of the communication tools to guide your user through your workflow that you're creating. So we've got tabs, which can be personal tabs or group tabs or channel tabs. Personal's one-on-one tab. We'll dive into this a bit more. And then bots. With bots, you can have one-on-one conversations, or just conversational bots. You can have messaging extensions or webhooks, and then connectors to listen to external things. Sorry, was that a question, or if it was, I didn't quite catch that.
I think that was just external chatter.
Okay. Excuse me. Yeah, so we'll dive into each one of these a little bit more. So platform interfaces are the way you are going to present information to your users. So the first type is a tab, which is basically a Teams-aware, iframed, rich web experience. Again, Teams doesn't host your web, right? Your website. This is an external website that you put into an iframe. It must be iframeable, obviously. That is Teams aware. You use our SDKs to interact with Teams objects. They can be personal or group scoped, which basically means one-on-one. So the top example is from our cafe and dining bot. This is a tab that shows me my favorited cafes. And so my favorite cafe, I work at Lincoln Square, so my favorite cafe is Lincoln Square. If I can open up this, I get my version of the cafe and dining bot. Down at the bottom, you'll see an example of our one of our line of business samples called HR Talent Management. This is a group tab accessible to everybody in the group, so everybody in the group sees the exact same tab. But yeah, tabs are a good place to get started because they're fairly simple. You could create a non-Teams aware tab if you wanted to, and just wanted to embed some static content. That's pretty easy to do, or you can extend this more functionality. If you're looking for ways to integrate Power Apps into your Teams experience, or you're looking for SharePoint Foundation and the ability to sort of host the same SharePoint web experience both in Teams and in SharePoint. This is where you would go to start that process. Tabs are where that happens. Bots, everybody's favorite bots. So bots are fancy APIs that facilitate communication flow from the Teams client to some other system and back. That's it. You can do amazingly advanced things with bots where you're passing into natural language processing like Lewis, and you're using Q&A Maker to take the results of your natural language processing, query some external data source, do interesting things, plugging them into machine learning or AI scenarios or something like that. Or you can have really non-intelligent bots that just present your user a list of options. They pick one of those options, and they get a static return based on those options. Bots really are just a way to flow information between teams and some other system and bring it back. There you can do really complex things or fairly simple things. You interact with your users through conversations, messaging extensions, or outgoing webhooks. So conversations are, hey bot, go do this, or hey bot, I need your help with this, or some sort of question and response query with your bot. So that's typically what people think of when they think of bots, is the question and response. But you can see on the top example, I use the cafe and dining bot again. This bot doesn't do a bunch of natural language processing. It has basically a bunch of options that I can choose from when I say, okay, bot, tell me about, is Cafe X serving pizza, or where is sushi available, or stuff like that. It's pretty question and response, but with a limited set of questions. It's not trying to solve all of the whole world. Down towards the bottom, you see an example of a excuse me, a messaging extension. And a messaging extension is a way to use a bot to query some external data source, to grab some information, and then return it into a conversation that formatted via a card, which we'll talk about in a little bit if you want to use a card, in order to have a conversation about that external information. So this one is using the, looks like the talent bot that's going to pull in items from a database and insert them into the chat so that we can then have a conversation about this. Another great example one is the Azure DevOps one. So you can query work items from your Azure DevOps, post the work item to a channel, have a conversation about it, and it works quite well. So you can use this to query any external or internal data that you need. It has to be publicly available because your bot has to be able to get to it. Well, publicly have a public facing endpoint. It does authentication and all of those kinds of things, obviously. But this is a great way to pull in information and have a conversation about it in a collaborative fashion with people who don't necessarily have access to the core. Scratch that. Ignore that I said that. That's not true. But to have conversation about information, basically. And then outgoing webhooks can allow you to hook some other system and push and pull information from some other system. So connectors are a little bit different, the opposite of a webhook, right? A connector allows you to create an endpoint that you can use to post information to teams, right? So you can create an endpoint that listens. You give it a JSON payload, and it's going to use that JSON payload to post into a channel. You can configure which channels listen to the endpoint, so more than one channel can listen to the same endpoint. This is a good way to push information into teams from some external source. And then as you can see in the example here, you can also add actions to what's been pushed into teams that will then respond to the place that they push from. And maybe do some information, or just open up a website. Like I think this example actually, if you were to go click the change status button, would just open up a URI that says, hey, go here and do this thing, but can also return JSON back as part of one of those buttons, which you can configure. Okay, so that's it. So for sort of the main ways that you present your application to your users, and then we want to jump into the interactive communication tools, which is the specifics on how that information is presented. But each of these things that I'm about to talk about can be used in the context of any of the other things. For example, we'll talk about cards first, and cards get used all over the place. Cards can be used in a bot. They can be used from a tab. They can be used to pass information all over the place. Actually, all throughout Office 365, right? The Office 365 connector card works across all Office platforms. So the cards can be used pretty much everywhere. It's a primary method of formatting information to present to your users. Comes in a lot of different flavors. You have adaptive cards. You have just raw messages. You can thumbnails. You can lots of different things sent to your users. And with most of the card types, you also guide your users through the interaction by providing them suggested actions. Do one of these things. Would you like to look up baggage by passenger name? So you can guide your users through the interaction using it. Now, cards, the important thing to note about cards is the information is going to be posted to the channel in which you're communicating with the user. Sometimes that's really useful and sometimes that's not so useful. So if you want the information to be available in the channel, whether that's one-on-one or a group channel, a card is the way to go. It's going to keep the information in the history of the channel for all eternity. Alternatively, you have an option of using something called a task module. A task module is a modal style pop-up that will keep the information separate from the channel conversation. So your task module allows you to have a little modal pop-up, collect some information, and then when they do something at the end, you can post a subset of that information back to the channel or just a success message or whatever. But it allows you to, you can think of, you're creating a survey. Maybe you don't want the setup of the survey to be in the channel forever. You just want the results of that setup to be in the channel. So you use a task module to set up. You say, hey, survey bot, I want to create a survey. You pop up a task module, set up the survey in the task module, and then when they click OK, send a channel, it sends the survey to the channel and not the setup. So that's the big difference between using cards versus task modules for the purposes of guided actions and collecting information. Task modules are also really good for presenting rich content. You want to stream a video, you want to embed or give a little pop-up with a Power BI dashboard, like passing some parameters to an iframeable Power BI dashboard that says, for example, one of the ones I saw was somebody pulled in, had a connector to their dynamic CRM, pulled in a company or an account record, and then you could click on the account record. It would pop up a task module of a dashboard scoped to that account. That was their Power BI dashboard. That's the kind of stuff that you can enable with the task module. You can place any iframeable content inside of a task module. Deep links. So deep links, I don't have a pretty screenshot for deep links because, well, there's not really a screenshot that goes with them. But deep links allow you to create a context-aware link to an entity or an action, right? So you can link deeply into teams. So you don't have to link, you can link to a specific item within a tab or a conversation. You can start a chat. You can start scheduling a meeting. You can link into specific child entities of any entity inside, not any entity, but most entities inside teams. And we're working to increase the scope of things you can link to all the time. For example, you can use a deep link to create a link to the install page for your app. That kind of stuff is what deep links are for. So if you want to guide people to a different portion of teams, deep links are a great way to do that. And last but not least, your activity feed. Your activity feed is sort of your user's inbox that summarizes all activity across teams. If you post something to a channel with your app, it's going to show up in their activity feed automatically. But you can also just have your app put things into people's activity feeds, and then use a deep link to send them somewhere. So say you want to notify someone that, hey, in this public channel, there's something you need to go see. You can post something to their activity feed that gives them a deep link that when they click on it, it sends them to somewhere inside Teams. All right, so putting it all together. So basically, what you're going to do is you're going to choose one or more of those one of the ways to interact with your users, and then you're going to select some of the excuse me, methods of presenting the information methods of presenting the information to your users, and put them together to build your app. There's a lot of flexibility in the way that you do that. Do you want to? You can do, for example, choosing between a card and a task module is a pretty important choice because it's going to drastically change the experience of your users. A lot of people just kind of default to cards, and it's really easy to fall into, I build bots with cards and those are my Teams apps. Don't forget, there are a lot of different ways to interact with your users. So make sure you're using the method that makes sense based on your scenario. Oftentimes we see people just sort of get pigeonholed and I use this thing and that thing and I use it for everything. It's a flexible platform, so you can usually do that, but it might not be the best user experience. And as you advance and as you figure out more and more that you can do with Teams, you can start leveraging graph APIs. You can start using Lewis and Q&A Maker. I do recommend Q&A Maker if you've never played with it. Just go check it out. If you have any sort of FAQ database, it can frequently asked questions database. You can set it up really easily to just turn into a bot that can query that database straight from Teams and return information to your users. Q&A Maker is pretty cool. It does a lot of cool stuff. But anyways, basically, my recommendation is start small with something simple and a well-defined scope to get your users used to the idea of using Teams as an app platform and not just as a collaboration platform, and then layer on more complex scenarios as you go along. If you jump straight to something really complex, you're going to get a lot of pushback from folks unless you do an amazing job, but typically you're probably going to have some hiccups along the way. That's going to create pushback and maybe sour people on apps on Teams in general. So start small and build your way up. All right, so we are going to do some quick demo, but before I jump into demo, I want to pause and see if there were any questions. If you have any questions, now would be a great time. Are there repositories of example bots which we can consume as how-to? Yes. So I will give you a link before the last slide has an aka.ms link. But if you go to, there are two types of examples for bots. So the bot framework, folks, the bot framework is built on Azure. It's separate from Teams. Teams just is a consumer of the bot framework. You can build bot framework bots that work across multiple channels, right? You can build ones that work on Skype, or ones that work on Slack, or ones that work on Facebook or on Twitter or all over the place, right? So bots are really flexible in the channels that you can use in your bot. Teams is just a single channel for building bots. So the bot framework team has, if you just Google bot framework documentation, they have really awesome samples that are specific to building bot framework. I'll give you some samples. I'll give you a link to samples that are specific to Microsoft Teams. But so you just kind of want to pay attention to bot framework is more than just bots on Microsoft Teams, if that makes sense. Let me know if I didn't answer your question, but yes, there are definitely GitHub repositories for that.
Hello. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for the information.
Cool. How can you use application insights here? Can you let me know a little bit more what you mean? Do you mean application insights to monitor your application, or application insights embedded in Teams for people to converse about application insights? For the former, since your Teams application isn't hosted in Teams, you would use application insights the same way that you would for any other API, web, or bot framework bot. So you're going to, why does this keep bouncing up and down? Very odd. So you can use it. So basically for those, you're going to use it the same way that you would for any other website, right? You just hook it up and you do that normally. As far as integrating application insights into Teams for communication, I haven't seen anything. I haven't seen any things. Let me think. I haven't seen anything more than just embedding application insights, sort of web tabs in Teams. Because you can always add a web. I haven't seen any apps built more in depth. I'll have to follow up with you on that one and see if I know of any examples of anybody do anything more interesting. So You can scope that. That's
Andrew, are you referring to Lou's comment?
yes. Sorry.
Okay.
I guess I'm reading this in the wrong screen, so you guys aren't actually. I meant to have this over here. Hey, I was reading the chat sort of without actually. Okay. Anyways, I'll have to follow up with you on that one. That's a little bit more detailed. And as far as adaptive cards coming to connectors, I'm not sure if there's any plans for that other than sort of the JSON payloads that already exist. I'll have to follow up with that one. All right, so I'm going to jump over to some demo space, and we're going to go ahead and demo straight in my own personal teams here at Microsoft. If you have more questions, please feel free to keep adding them to the chat. And I want to leave about 10 minutes for this. Okay. So first, I want to show sort of the difference between a personal app and a channel or group app. So we're going to start out with the one I was talking about earlier, which is our cafe and dining bot experience. So you can have a bot that exists purely in a one-to-one context with users. So you install the app, they find it from their app overflow menu, and they can open up the app and they can work with it directly in here. App Studio, you'll notice, is an app. I talked about that earlier. It's an app that you use to make apps, which is pretty cool. We always love Meta. So this is really simple. It contains a couple things. So I can have a conversation with my bot, and what I talked about earlier. So when you build your manifest with the bot, this is one of the things that can really help you. You may not present. This is one of the things that can really help your users work with your bot well. Is when you're designing your app manifest, you're going to give a bunch of suggestions and commands that your bot can service. And this is where if you don't want to start with natural language processing and all of that kind of stuff, you don't really have to. You can give people just specific options on what they can do with your bot, and that's it. So this is a really good way to quickly get a bot that works. So we can just grab one of these. So we'll say, hey, what's my assigned cafe? We chat with the bot. It goes off to the bot framework. And the way that this works is, so Teams is going to send that information to the bot framework, which then talks to your bot, which then returns back to the bot framework infrastructure and then back to Teams. So one of the questions we get asked a lot is, can we have a bot that's hosted locally with no public endpoints? Currently, no, that is not possible. This has to have a public endpoint. So you're going to want to make sure you're handling that appropriately, because it goes externally and then back and then to your bot, and then externally and then back to your bot or back to Teams. So your bot will just return, and you'll see here's an example of a couple different types of cards. So it just sent me a little bit of information, and then I think this is a thumbnail card, but it's just so there's a lot of different cards that will format things differently, and it returns me the information in a nice format. Over on the favorites tab, so this is a Teams aware website that's hosted externally that you load up inside Teams, and it will tell me, hey, you favorited the Lincoln Square Cafe, and here's what's available for lunch that day. I can pop up and that will open an external website apparently, or I can delete that. You can set up new reminders. I want to grab. So here's a good example of a task module that's going to pop up, and this is what I was talking about. You use those bits and pieces in a lot of different ways. So this is a task module from a tab. You can use a task module from a bot. You can use a task module from a message extension. You can use task modules kind of all over the place. So those little bits and pieces get reused throughout the way users interact with your apps. So that's a quick, easy personal app that contains a bot and a tab. And honestly, that's not that hard to build. You if you have the data stored somewhere in some structured format, that's building something like that is really fairly simple. You're just pushing and pulling information on top of it, particularly if you don't want your bot to do anything crazy. You can put those together fairly quickly. And so here's a different app that's an HR talent management app. In this case, it's this would be for posting jobs. So I can talk to my bot. So when you're in a channel, you're going to talk to your bot by you add it, just so you mention it, just like you would for anything else. Once I add the bot, it pops up my nice contextual menu of, hey, what can I do? I can search, I can grab help, I could grab let's go ahead and do a new job posting. We'll say I want to do a new job posting. Hopefully this won't be too slow. They're usually a little on the slow side because of, well, they're hosted on free tiers and stuff like that. So it returns a card. And so this is one of those situations where it's returning a card, but personally, I think this should have been a task module or task module instead of a card, because it doesn't really make sense to post this information back into the channel, but hey. And we'll say you're in Singapore, and we're going to go ahead and create the posting. And then we can open the form, which is actually going to be a task module, which is going to give me this in a different way. But yeah, so see, now it's posted into the channel. So if you had used just a task module for that workflow, you wouldn't get this post into the channel. You could just post just back this card instead of the setup form, which I think is a really slick workflow. And then you can go back and forth between sort of tabs. So there's tabs that will show me all of the applications, and you can dive in here and bounce back and forth. So different positions, who's available for the positions, and this is just static information that's presented to the user. But I hope that gives you a little overview of some of the stuff that you can do sort of with apps. I'll talk a bit. I'll give you some samples so all of the samples that you see in here, we've got an airline sample, an employee leave sample that allows you to request time off, that kind of stuff. Some more advanced samples. One of the really cool samples that we just published, which I would say is more of a template and not really a sample because it's pretty close to something that you could just load up, is a employee announcements sample that allows you to push announcements to lists of users. So you wanted to push, hey, you wanted to send a one-to-one message to all of your users that said there's an emergency, leave the building. You can totally do that, or be sure to come to the potluck on Friday. You can push that. So the announcements one is pretty amazing. I'm a big fan of it, and it's in our sample repository that I'll give you a link to at the end. So I did want to spend a little bit of time talking about what's coming next in terms of the development platform. This is not what's coming next for the entire Teams platform. This is what's coming next for just the developer platform. So we are going to be releasing the Teams Bot Builder SDK version 4 for Node. There's been a bit of confusion out there around whether or not Teams supports Bot Framework v4, if you're familiar with any of the information around this. So Teams just natively supports Bot Builder v4 because you can always interact with your bot via just straight REST calls. The Bot Builder SDK, on the other hand, that wraps Bot Framework v4 we did not have our Teams. We have our own SDK that wraps the Bot Builder SDK, which wraps the Bot Framework, which allows you to add Teams aware stuff to your bot through an SDK instead of just through REST. We released our C# one last month, and our Node version is coming out this month in preview release, and we hope to GA them shortly after both the previews are out and if we get any feedback on them. Those will be available on NuGet and GitHub. Big thing for us is moving towards mobile parity for apps, including the ability to use messaging extensions, channel tabs, in-app authentication, channel tabs in-app. Right now, if you do a channel tab on a phone, it will push you to a website rather than load the channel tab in the app itself. Same with authentication. We want to be able to have that work in-app. All that kind of stuff. Along the same mobile lines or device functionality lines, the ability to request access to the camera or the microphone or the app's location so that you can use that in your app. and there's a whole bunch of admin settings that go along with the ability to request access. So you can turn them on, turn them off, force enable them. There's a lot of admin options that go along with that. But code side, you can now, same way you can with an iOS or an Android app, say, hey, I want to use your camera. User will get a little pop-up that says, hey, can this app access your camera, using the sort of native functionality of the device, and then it will allow the device to take pictures and post them straight into a channel or whatever. App pinning, so the ability to pin apps to the sidebar. So right now you saw that they're not buried, but they're available in sort of the Overflow menu. We want to allow you to pin apps to the sidebar so that you can make use of them that way. And then more extensive app localization support through your manifest. So the ability to have multiple versions of your app in multiple languages, and to sort of have that all work well within the manifest, referencing different apps with different language sets. Okay, so resources for today's topic. If you want to learn more about today's topic, I talked about the line of business app samples. They are available there, aka.ms/teams LoB samples. There's a whole bunch in there. Each one of them has their own README that will guide you through each individual app and how to sideload it, how to get started with them. You can explore the code. We monitor those repositories pretty closely. So if you have any issues, or if there's anything with them, please do let us know. If you feel like you want to submit a pull request to get something changed or to expand the functionality or whatever, please feel free to do so. We're super happy to collaborate with everyone on those samples. We also have other samples available on GitHub that aren't inside here. So if you just go to GitHub and you go to the Office Dev organization and search MS Teams samples, that'll get you all of our samples, or just search MS Teams and that'll get you all of the MS Teams repositories available in GitHub. I did not put I should have put a link to that, but I didn't, sorry. But yeah, just GitHub, search for MS Teams. There's a ton of stuff available on GitHub for you guys to take a look at. The developer community, that MS Teams dev will get you to a landing page that will guide you around the developer community. So if you want to go to the tech community site, or you want to jump into our dev docs or whatever, MS Teams dev will get you to a landing page that will guide you to those things. If you have any questions while you're outside of today, while you're building an app, we do monitor Stack Overflow. So just tag your question with Teams, and if no one else in the community answers you, we will get on there and try to solve your problem. We just created a new Teams developer section in the Microsoft Tech community site, so that's now available for you to use under the Office section. And we also pretty closely watch issues on our developer documentation library. So if you have any questions about the documentation, or while you're trying to follow one of the samples or one of the tutorials or whatever, please feel free to raise an issue on there, and you should hear back from us fairly quickly, and we monitor them pretty closely. Okay, so that's it for today. We've got 10 minutes for questions. So if you have any questions, now is the time to ask.
Did anyone from, when you had questions from earlier, there was a little bit of chatter in the IM window. I believe most of them were answered, but we can go back through them just so that if you want to expand on it at all. Someone had asked, can you make apps available on only specific channels? The example is, I have an enterprise creative cloud license, but I want only to give access to specific groups of users. Can I create a channel or group in Teams and have only those licenses available there?
So you can. Yes, but you have to push the app and not enable side loading in your organization. So if you enable side loading, you can't really control that, because if they can get, well, I mean, they have to, yes, you can. So if you, If you publish the app to your organization, you couldn't, I don't believe. If you publish the app to your organization, it's available in your organization's app library. So then anyone who any team owner can then grab and that fires that says, hey, don't do this, and stop any interaction with your app. But if you just sideload your app rather than uploading it to your organization's library, that would solve that problem, because it's not available to them to sideload, so they wouldn't be able to put it in their team. So you could put it in whatever team you wanted, and they couldn't put it in any other team because they wouldn't have access to the code. Does that make sense? So if you want to only have an app in a specific channel, don't load it into your organization's app library. The presentation will be made available, and so the deck and the recording will be available for your consumption after a couple days. Dana, I think it's a couple days.
Yep. Yeah, tomorrow or the next day. And we'll definitely if you're not following us on Twitter or at Office Dev handle, then follow us on that, and we'll make sure that it goes into the various channels with a link to the blog summary, and it will have the recording and deck.
Awesome.
In that. And there was another question. I opened tickets and cases on TechNet and MSDN. Do I have to use Stack Overflow to get issues fixed?
I would recommend using Stack Overflow, yes. It's TechNet and MSDN, we tend to get a lot more user-focused questions. So the people who primarily monitor that are more user-focused in terms of, hey, help me debug this specific thing that's specific to my client or whatever. I'm building app questions, Stack Overflow or just raise an issue on the DevDocs library would be the two best ways to get a hold of us to make sure that you're going to get developer support as quickly as possible.
Okay. And then Andrew asked, can bot applications be surfaced in SharePoint for FAQs?
Yes, I believe SharePoint is a viable channel for a bot. I've never put a bot on SharePoint, but I'm fairly certain that you can. Typically, so yes, but I've never done it, so I can't 100% for certain say that yes, but I'm pretty sure that's a viable channel.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
I tried to I created a bot and I pushed it to the team, but what I noticed is all my other team members could not see the bot, while I'm the only one that is visible to it. Is that why you said we should upload it to the library first before publishing it, or what? I didn't get that aspect.
Did you use a manifest to deploy?
No, I just use the Azure. I use the Azure.
Yeah. So if you just use the ID, that's going to happen. You want to use App Studio to create a manifest for you, and then load it into the channel, and then upload that manifest into the channel that you want. That'll get it so it's available to everybody.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, that's a common scenario that happens a lot. If you follow the bot framework documentation on how to build a bot, it can lead you down a path where you end up just talking to your bot by GUID, which will not really make it fully Teams enabled. Once you've got your bot set up and deployed, you want to use App Studio to create the manifest file so that you can upload the bot to a channel or one-to-one, so that users can interact fully with your bot. Make sure you don't just talk to it by GUID.
Thanks.
Anyone else have any questions? We have about 5 more minutes.
I have a question.
Okay.
I'm using Teams with direct routing. Is it possible to see when calls come in and get an event and display cards related to the incoming call?
I'm not going to guess at an answer to that for you. So I can take that one offline. and I can follow up with you. I'll get the right person to answer that question.
Thank you.
So that was. Can you post that to the chat for me?
I'm not able to access the chat. It says I'm not part of the chat.
Oh, okay. Let me take a note.
Just out of curiosity, what location are you in?
UK.
UK. Okay.
I'm in the US and I can't access the chat either.
Oh.
I'm based in EMEA also, not available to reach.
Okay, well, that's something we're going to need to look into. Thank you for letting us know that.
Is there somebody I can just drop an email to with my details?
Okay.
Yeah, so if you want to do, I'm ANCLEAR.
Okay.
You just go to the title. You just go to the title slide. You should have your link there.
Hey, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Well, it's about SharePoint provider-hosted apps. Well, we have a provider-hosted app for SharePoint, and we are thinking about building a Teams integration. So, which means there will be REST calls from Teams directly to our Azure host, and this Azure host communicates with the SharePoint Online. Have you ever thought about building such applications, or is there any proof of concept regarding this? Because we are not sure about the architecture.
So what does SharePoint do in this scenario? Is it you're talking to a SharePoint list or something? What's SharePoint's role?
Yeah, well, we're using just SharePoint for authentication or the data access. So our Azure hosted app is using the user authentication of the SharePoint user actually, and the user or from the Azure application we are catching the data of SharePoint lists. And now we would like to do this from the Teams. So Teams will maybe communicate with our Azure hosted application, and this Azure hosted application will communicate with SharePoint Online. So it's the same tenant, but we are not sure whether this works regarding authentication and all this stuff.
It does, and you're gonna use a bot for that. That will, depending on how you want to present the information to the user, you can either use a conversational interaction with the bot, so that they can talk to a bot to get information from SharePoint, or you can use a messaging extension to allow them to just directly query the information. If it's just more of a search this list of things to return an item from that list, you're going to look at a messaging extension. If you want to do more complex scenarios, you're probably going to want to do a conversational bot. But a bot will handle the Office 365 authentication smoothly between you and Azure and SharePoint.
Okay, thank you.
So in the samples, there are quite a few samples in there that would help guide that. Do a very similar scenario.
Okay, so it's in the LoB app samples, or?
Yes, I don't know that any of those ones directly talk to SharePoint, but all of them are going to talk to some kind of data store, and so it doesn't really matter that it's SharePoint in particular. They should guide you through it. I will try to find a good one that uses a SharePoint list. I know we have one that consumes a SharePoint list and presents the information. I think it's.
And you think it should be a bot, right?
Yeah. Bots are the primary way. So, and that's what's kind of confusing about the fact that it's called a bot. Bots are just the primary way that you're going to go from Teams to some external place, get some external thing, and bring it back. It's just going to facilitate that communication flow for you. But a bot is the way that you're going to facilitate that.
Okay.
Unless you want to, unless you want to push, if you want to just straight push from SharePoint into Teams, then you could look at using a connector. But that's going to limit what you can do a bit. Connectors are pretty simple. They're designed to just be sort of one time. Here's some stuff. Now go away.
Okay, yeah. I think we're actually thinking about a scenario, something is happening in the application, and then we will post it to the Teams channel. And then you say we should use a connector, right?
Yeah, if you just want to post one-time information to a Teams channel, a connector is the way to go. That'll create an endpoint for you that you just in the dev doc library. We have examples of the JSON that you'd send to the endpoint. So you just the App Studio will guide you through setting up the manifest file, which will get you your endpoint, and then you format the JSON correctly. And then once you have, then you can subscribe to that endpoint from any channel inside Teams. So if you wanted to go to 1 channel or 50 channels, just each individual channel that you wanted to, you install that connector in that channel, and then it will, whenever you push information to it, that data will show up in that channel.
Okay.
So that's the easiest way to do it, because it doesn't take much, right? You're just basically saying, hey, give me some JSON.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
I put a question. I know that we are overextending.
Sure, I can hang out for a couple more minutes. Do you want to turn off the recording? Or do you want to
Yeah,
keep going?
no problem. Yeah, no problem.
Sure, hang on a sec. All right, well, thanks to those of you who have joined. If anyone has additional questions, we'll stay on for a couple more minutes. And if not, we look for the announcement about the blog summary and recording. I just put the link to the blogs in the IM chat. If not, it will be on Twitter. So if you can't see the chat, you'll be able to see the announcement by following us on our Office Dev handle on Twitter. And other than that, have a great day or evening, and we will see you next month.